Welcome to the Cambridge Tech Podcast, talking all things technology from the heart of the UK's tech capital. Here are your hosts, Faye Holland and James Parton.
Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Faye. So another week flies by, James, and was it a manic week before you had to log off to go off on holiday?
Yeah, a little bit. Just trying to get everything out of the way. So been working on a new idea and kind of bringing together some organisations that are interested in partnering on that. So I'll keep that under my hat for the time being.
No. From now on, you are banned from doing that.
Okay. I will share when I can, though. I just don't want to let the cat out of the bag too early. I kind of got out of the office this week, visited our central Cambridge locations in Regent Street and Hills Road. So it was lovely to catch up with Georgia and Holly. Been doing quite a lot of podcast admin-y stuff behind the scenes. Also caught up with Jane from Cambridge Science Park. And as you say, I'm off on holidays. As you listen to this, I'm going to be frolicking around the hills of Austria like Julie Andrews.
The frolicking around bit is freaking me out now. I don't really know what to do about that. I'm going to move swiftly on. So my week was just keep motoring, keep getting the work done. I think I'm on a mission. Whether this is going to carry on till the end of the year, who knows? But last week was a big week because we got 21 to Watch up and running again for 2026. So I'll update on that in a moment in the news slot. So that's about it from me. Should we do the general news?
Yeah, quite a bit to get through. So the first story is Cambridge-based Genie AI, who are a legal tech firm, has struck an alliance with South Carolina's Charleston School of Law. The deal marks a new standard in higher education, with AI being fully integrated into the curriculum to prepare students for the future world of work. The collaboration empowers law students to master practical skills needed to excel in modern in-house counsel and private practice roles, shifting their future role from legal operator to strategic business enabler.
And next we have a mover and shaker announcement. Industrial tech veteran Peter Herwick, who was CEO at Schneider Electric before a senior team reshuffle late last year, has become chair of Cambridge flexible microchip company Pragmatic Semiconductor. Herwick takes the reins from Eric Lankacre, who has served as chair since 2020.
A friend of the show, Pam Garside's reign as chair of Cambridge Angels Investment Group has come to an end. Pam was the body's first female chair when she took the role in September 2022 and has now handed the reins to dual appointees Amy Retherup and Dr. Robert Swan, both serial entrepreneurs of renowned stature. At the same time, Emmy Nichols' title has been changed to CEO of Cambridge Angels, which is very well deserved, so congratulations to everyone. And good luck to Pam. And you can maybe dip back in the archives and listen to our conversation with Pam back in episode 119.
And you were very good doing that research, but I forgot we also did Amy. Amy's been on the podcast a couple of times, hasn't she, in her own right, and with Cambridge Science Centre. So I think it's absolutely brilliant to have those two now as dual appointees.
And Robert Swan is a judge of the Trinity Bradfield Prize as well. So it's all very, very close-knit, isn't it?
It is. Indeed it is. Right. So we've got a couple of pieces of competition news, and I just did a prequel to this one in my update. So 21 to Watch nominations window has now opened. The three that started the list are Omar Nivron, who was the person. Omar is developing an AI platform for accurately predicting extreme weather events in the changing climate. We then have Hothouse Therapeutics, who are on the company listing. They are using plant-based engineering to transform vaccines. And in the things category, we have Kodiak Technologies, which are developing metal-free electrolytes for next-generation energy storage. So all quite different, which is the way 21 to Watch generally goes. Entrants can come from anywhere across the east of England. They can submit at 21towatch.com, and they can do that by the 9th of January. But I would urge people do it earlier than later, because you then get all of the advantage of all the extra promotion. And that's basically the point of 21 to Watch, is raising the profile of these early stage startups. So head over to 21towatch.com for more information.
Awesome. And news from another competition in Cambridge, which is the University of Cambridge's Venture Creation Challenge, where the 8 finalists of the latest challenge have just been revealed by IE Cambridge. The finalists will compete in 2 categories, business venture and social venture, and the grand finale is on November the 13th. So this year's finalist teams are Cambridge Dielectrics, Green Mixes, Obersense, Otzi, Protella Bio, Sominex, Epstein, and Clear Methane. So with both competitions, it's a reminder there's never a shortage of innovation coming out of our region. And I think I'll actually be going along. So we'll try and report back and maybe capture some sound from that as well.
Okay, super. The last piece of news is on the events front. Not quite tech, but more business. There's an early bird registration that's about to run out for the region's Chamber of Commerce flagship event, CAMS B2B, which is on the 19th of November. There's the usual B2B expo. So it's really important that businesses understand all the different things that they can do locally and across the region. So that's what the expo is all about. But then they've got some really interesting keynote speeches. Again, not from tech people, but you've got Claire Williams from F1 Racing, Barry Tong, who started a business with £10 and built it to a £15 million enterprise, and Mike Green, who's Channel 4's secret millionaire. So I expect all of those will be quite interesting conversations as well. So if you're interested, head over to camsb2b.co.uk to find out more and to book your tickets. And that's it. So James, this episode, this was all down to you. So we're just going to hear you having a conversation, because I was knee deep in Cambridge Tech Week when you recorded it, I think. So who are you talking to this week, James?
Yeah, I caught up with Marco De Novellis, who's the group editor of Founders Forum and Tech Nation. So Marco, thanks so much for taking the time to come onto the show. I know you're busy, so it's very much appreciated.
Fantastic to be here, James. Thanks for having me.
So we always like to get to know our guests before we dive into the detail of the conversation. So why don't you just give us a kind of brief career background and how you've ended up at the Founders Forum and Tech Nation?
Yeah, absolutely. So now I'm group editor of Founders Forum and Tech Nation. So I lead on digital media content research and insights across both organisations, really at the centre of the UK tech ecosystem. My background's always been in journalism and digital media. So before Founders Forum Group, I was in the business education space. I was editor of Business Because, which is an online publisher focused on edtech, business education, and also a content marketing agency for business schools. And actually there went on a real startup growth journey. So when we started out, we were 4 people in a room above a laundry in West London, got very hot in the summer on kind of tight budgets and doing all aspects of the business. My colleague called himself head of marketing, but really he was the only marketing person, and went through a real scaling journey, and then ultimately went through an acquisition by a major US organization. So that was a really interesting 5-6 years going on that startup journey and experiencing that and expanding to a much larger team, ending up working with global offices across US, India, China, and then heading up content for 2 websites with over 1 million monthly visitors, and being in that kind of rapidly growing space. But education is always a little bit behind. I wanted to be more at the forefront, and that's where I joined Founders Forum and Tech Nation. And without going into too much depth, for those that don't know, Founders Forum was started by Brent Hoberman, who's the founder of lastminute.com and made.com. And he wanted to replicate the founder community in Silicon Valley in Europe, and building up that community with invite-only events, as well as a whole group of businesses that support entrepreneurs at every stage of their journeys. So we have like Founders Makers for creative support, Founders Law for legal support. We have First Minute Capital, which is our venture capital firm, Founders Factory, a venture builder. So there's this whole ecosystem that is so exciting to be a part of, and Tech Nation is a big part of that.
So you're having been through that kind of startup journey yourself, was that part of the attraction of kind of moving into Founders Forum and Tech Nation? You know, you must have a lot of empathy for the kinds of companies you're now researching.
Yeah, exactly. It's not an easy space, and it's really kind of impressive when people take the leap and go alone and build their own things. And I think where Founders Forum and Tech Nation is positioned, it's really the whole kind of founder funnel. So all the way from early stage up to the kind of household names that we have attending our invite-only Founders Forums. So, the founders of Wikipedia, Snapchat, Canva, Monzo, Wise are household names. And then being part of this ecosystem that supports companies on that journey is really exciting. I was hired to build out more of a content research and insight strategy that we didn't necessarily have on the Founders Forum side, and connect with that community 24/7, not just through events, which was the core part of what it started out as. But then after I joined in 2023, Founders Forum acquired Tech Nation, and that has much more of a strength in that research and insights, and that's where I came in and we've built up from there, and 2 years on now in a really exciting space, which with what we offer the tech ecosystem, what we offer founders especially.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I'm sure a lot of listeners that have been in the startup ecosystem for a while would be very familiar with Tech Nation. And obviously I was kind of involved myself back in the Shoreditch Silicon Roundabout days when Tech City was kind of formed, and then that grew into Tech Nation. So as you say, it's been, I think, 2 years since Founders Forum acquired the Tech Nation assets and the brand name. So could you just give us a quick recap of what's happened in those 2 years?
Yeah, so we took on Tech Nation because of the fantastic reputation, as you've mentioned, the real respected brand in the industry, and more importantly, a real track record of supporting the growth of UK startups through startup programs, through the research, through the visa program as well. Really, we've built it up again from the ground up. And so we partnered with our founding partner, HSBC Innovation Banking, and we relaunched our key startup growth programs, first of all. And I know we might go into more depth on these, but we have various programs that support startup founders, non-equity programs based around networks, around mentorship, about experiences and knowledge sharing. So for instance, we have Climate for climate startups. We have Future 50, which is a real flagship pre-IPO network for late stage ventures, Rising Stars, which is a national pitch competition. That was really important to relaunch these core programs and focus on those that can make the most impact. We continued the great strength in research and insights, so gathering that data on the UK tech ecosystem and providing that for founders, investors, corporates who want to play a part in it. Absolutely key, as I mentioned, was that visa program. So we are the official endorsement body for the Global Tech Talent Visa. So just enabling the best talent to come and build their careers in the UK. That was renewed this year. So that's super important in supporting founders with that talent. It's so much has happened in the tech sector, but also on our side as well. We also played a hand in launching the London AI Hub. So this is a direct collaboration with Morantix and Hussein Kasai, who founded Onfido. And that's providing a community co-working space, an event space in London to act as the kind of centre of gravity for UK AI. And there's lots of kind of highlights we've had over the past year. As I mentioned, Rising Stars is our UK-wide pitch competition. Any early stage B2B, our focus at the moment, startup can take part. They're competing for £3 million in investment up for grabs. We have this incredible pitch competition at London Tech Week, which really draws in the crowds. So there's been a lot of highlights. Our real key focus has been focusing on those key high impact programs, continuing the success of the visa program, and just overall the feedback we've had from founders is what's really rewarding, and supporting them to build those businesses, providing that launch pad for them to scale in the UK, and then hopefully feed back into the community themselves.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, there's a lot there. Maybe one thing to just go back and double click on is pretty much every interview that we do on the podcast, talent and growing businesses is always one of the key challenging facing founders. So the visa, for the founders that are listening and are looking to potentially recruit talent in from overseas, what specifically can Tech Nation do there to support them in that process?
Yeah, I mean, so the visa that we work to endorse, the real advantage of it is that it's not tied to one employer. So that creates real opportunities for talent, to a lot of them starting their own businesses. It's for exceptional tech talent who are wanting that career flexibility. And for organizations, we have this incredible visa alumni community who are very, vetted, experienced, technical talent. A lot of them in kind of high demand spaces like AI, like analytics, and we can connect them with employers. We have regular events and meetups. And we also, slightly separately, but we're working with the Department of Business and Trade on AI and quantum specific job roles and honing the talent for that as well. Since we started the visa, we've endorsed over 6,000 people. That's just over 11 years, processed around 17,000 applications. So, we're really experienced in this space and just excited to see the kind of flows of talent we're getting to the UK. We did a report on that on our 10-year anniversary and spotlighted some founders, and there's just some incredible companies that have spawned out of this. I think one of the founders of WeWork was a global talent alumni, company called Unibuddy. Lots of cool companies have scaled, and they wouldn't have been able to without that visa opening those opportunities. So it's obviously a hot topic. It's something we need to do more to encourage talent to the UK and support them in building their careers here.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, no, that's great. So we reached out to get you on because we saw the publication of the UK AI Sector Spotlight Report, the 2025 edition, obviously. You've mentioned AI already in terms of the London hub, and, AI is a hot topic, obviously, everywhere, especially in Cambridge. There's a lot of activity happening in various areas of AI. So we felt this would be a really interesting conversation. So super pleased you've come on. So why don't we take a little deep dive into that report? You note in the report that the sector has reached a combined valuation of $230 billion in Q1 of this year, which is actually more than France and Germany combined. And the UK is home to more than 2,300 VC-backed AI startups, including 20 unicorns, delivering a compound annual growth rate of 22% between 2020 and 2024. Apologies for all of the figures there, but that's a really kind of confident and impressive kind of state of the nation, if you like, there from the UK's perspective. So give us your kind of your 30,000 foot view of how the UK is currently stacked up globally.
It's a super exciting time for AI in the UK. I think I'm speaking to you just a week after the UK-US tech prosperity deal. So we have like the likes of Microsoft, Nvidia, Google, OpenAI committing billions, that 30 billion plus to UK AI and tech infrastructure. Nvidia literally going crazy at the moment with investments in UK tech, like Wave's got 500 million, Nscale, Synthesia, 11 Labs. Just today or yesterday, separately, they just invested 100 billion in OpenAI. So they got good cash to be sharing around, but clearly making big plays. So hugely exciting on that side. The figures you've quoted are exciting as well, and they fit within the broader narrative of UK tech. So UK tech broadly has reached a combined market value of 1.2 trillion this year, dollars that is. It is growing at a rate that's outstripping its European competitors if you look at the last 5 years. And within that, AI is kind of bucking the trend for investment. So in the UK, venture capital investment in startups is following global trends of kind of going down from the 21-22 peak, where we saw a lot of inflated valuations and big funding going on, not necessarily for companies that delivered. The UK is higher than its European counterparts, so it's following that kind of normalization of the funding environment. But what we see is that AI is bucking that trend. So AI is just increasing steadily. So investment into AI ready and AI focused startups. And AI last year represented 27% of all UK venture capital. We're getting to a stage where there's not really such a thing as AI because every company is an AI company. So it's very hard to say AI does this. So maybe this report we released last year won't be something we would do in 5 years' time. But there's just super exciting companies, from coming out of Cambridge as well. Just in terms of our close network, like the likes of Wave with its autonomous vehicles has been through one of our programs. Synthesa, as I mentioned, which making AI videos from text. 11 Labs, which is doing incredible multilingual voice synthesis. There's so many cool companies coming out of the UK in AI, and I think the challenge now is to create the conditions for those companies to scale. A lot of the funding is coming from the US, and how can we do we want to prevent those companies relocating to the US and essentially becoming American companies, because that's what a lot of companies do when they scale. And I know there's some founders who've been very active in voicing their concerns about this.
Yeah, we're definitely going to dig into those kind of questions for sure. I mean, you kind of predicted my follow-up question there was, as you said, AI now is really entwining itself into everything on a day-to-day basis. In Cambridge, we used to have the kind of tech cluster, the life science cluster, that's now increasingly blurred at the edges, where AI is kind of crossing those traditional boundaries. So when you sat down to do the research, how did you define, when you give that data like 2,300 VC-backed AI startups, what was the kind of definition of what makes an AI startup?
Yeah, so for this particular research, we looked at companies that are using AI as a core part of their business model or a core part of their products and services, and then alongside the more foundational AI models, like generative AI models that are new and expanding. So if you're just layering AI on top of what you're doing in a add-on way, that you wouldn't be included. So it's really companies that might have pivoted, but the AI is a core part. That is becoming a bigger and bigger cohort of companies. What we don't have in the UK, as you know, is a foundational model. And the fact that the UK has been able to have this leadership in AI without the likes of a Mistral that France has is still pretty impressive. And there's arguments whether we need to build that. But that's how we looked at that. And the ecosystem's constantly changing. So it's something we'll be reviewing in our future analysis.
Yeah, so you touched there on France, for example, having the kind of model. Cambridge Tech Week happened fairly recently, and the theme of that whole week was AI, and the question of sovereign AI came up there. What are you hearing around that? Do you think this is a strategic necessity for the UK to develop capability there?
Well, there's big questions about how AI is all connected with defense tech as well. So there's a lot to unpack. I think instinctively, personally, the best things come out of collaboration. And I mean, that's on the defense side, the political side as well. And I think collaboration is going to make for the best and most effective and also most ethical models. But there is naturally going to be the challenges from China, challenges from elsewhere that you're going to have to think about. I think AI is just increasingly becoming a kind of national security question, which is a very interesting dynamic. We, in our reports, love to compare ourselves to France and Germany and saying UK is bigger than France and Germany combined and all this fun stuff that I'm sure the government loves to. But in reality, we are collaborators. We're not competitors, and what goes well in one market is only going to help the other. We've seen so many collaborations which have been fruitful, and I think we share the same challenges in Europe. So it's the same dynamic that when companies get to a certain size, they struggle to attract the capital within Europe itself to scale. Increasingly, they go to the US. So that's something to think about collaboratively, whether that's an AI company or another company, in terms of how do we retain those companies. And exit opportunities and stock markets are a big part of that as well. It's kind of a big question, but it is a big concern on the founders in our community's minds when they reach that certain scale. We have like an incredible ecosystem in the UK for starting a startup, for getting it going, for getting through that Series A, B stage. It's only especially with AI, when you're talking about the amount of capital that these startups need to scale in AI, the figures are getting like ridiculous, billions, millions. And so it's a big talking point, and we're engaging with founders on it almost every day.
Yeah, and just continuing that point about scaling, I think the report showed that whilst the UK does have this leadership position in Europe, 1 in 3 AI leaders are actively considering relocating their HQ outside of the UK, which is, as you say, is to access funding, access larger market opportunities, and maybe look for those exit opportunities as well. So that's got to be a major issue that we need to address.
Yes, and another bit of it is talent, and like what's going on in the AI space with talent is absolutely crazy. It's great for news stories. AI researchers are in like massive demand. So I studied history at university. I have massive regrets I didn't study computer science or how to be an AI researcher. Mark Zuckerberg apparently has a list of AI geniuses that he's kind of approaching one by one and poaching, and Meta's been poaching these AI researchers from Apple and OpenAI with kind of $100 million compensation packages. In Europe, maybe more like within our brain remit. Anthropic even is offering salaries up to $1 million. So there's like huge demand. And there's also this trend of acqui-hires, which is really interesting, where companies are essentially buying out the founders as opposed to the traditional asset of the company. So the talent is being valued more than the company itself. And we've seen like the big example of this was a company called Windsurf that was anticipating acquisition by OpenAI. And instead the staff members, they basically went into a Friday all hands meeting anticipating an acquisition by OpenAI. They'd all make money from it. Great. Instead, they heard that Google had just poached the founders in a $2.4 billion deal. So they basically took the founders on 2.4 billion plus a licensing deal, so no stake, but that's how much they valued this talent. And eventually, fortunately, Windsurf, another acquirer, came in. I think it was Cognizant, and kind of there was that payout for the employees. But that's a really shifting dynamic. We saw a UK company called Human Loop go through the same thing with Anthropic, who nabbed their 3 founders. So that just paints a picture of how in demand this top AI talent is, and how critical it's going to be to hone and keep that talent in the UK. And to be honest, if you look at who is leading these massive AI companies, I mean, look at Dennis Sabis at DeepMind. A lot of this talent is from the UK. How do we keep that here? How do we promote those key individuals in these startups to build in the UK as well? That's a big challenge, as well as the funding and the exit. It all comes together, and it's something we need to do. And there's a lot of desire among founders as well to build and develop the ecosystem here and give back. And a lot of it is about that giving back, because when you have companies here scaling and exiting, then that's only going to give back to the ecosystem. We did some research on this around UK unicorns and how many companies are founded by people who leave those unicorns. And it's hugely impactful if you look at the likes of Revolut, Monzo, that those people from those organizations have gone on to start multiple businesses. So we just need more of these big success stories. And to be honest, investment is kind of flowing that way, because VCs and investors are backing fewer with more in the AI space. They are being a bit more selective. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, well, let's pick that point up, because, clearly the majority of this conversation is going to be about AI, because we're focusing on the AI report. But there's a lot of other startups out there that aren't probably falling into that pure play AI category. And I think the report highlights that AI startups took 27% of all UK venture funding in 2024, and their rounds are looking like they're larger than non-AI startup rounds. So are we right to assume that the AI share of funding will continue to grow? And if it's going to, as I suspect you'll say it will, what are the implications for non-AI startups? Is it forcing non-AI founders to have some kind of AI angle, even if it's not truly core to what they do? How do you see this playing out?
Yeah, I think there's one thing to say, that pretty much every company description you look at now is like AI driven or AI empowered or something or other. It's basically the new version of blockchain and cloud before it. Everything's got blockchain in it. Then you get to the question of is it a bubble? I mean, everyone said this. If you're not using AI, you kind of are going to be left behind just because of the productivity gains. So we surveyed UK tech leaders, and 1 in 2 UK tech companies have changed their ways of working and improved their products and services as a result of AI. This was last year. So, I mean, I would anticipate that is almost every company is doing that. And UK tech leaders are saying that AI is having a hugely positive impact on their company's growth. Every company should be tapping into it in some way. There are going to be companies that it's not going to be at the forefront. I think it's important not to make things up, obviously. What we're seeing with AI funding is the valuations do tend to be bigger and the investments are larger. Globally, there's crazy figures, and there's huge investment by the big tech, big AI players who are dominating the space. I mean, OpenAI itself raised like 300 billion. Like, these are numbers hard to like compute. Is AI like a bubble? I was reading up on this. I think it looks like we're in that kind of gray zone now between boom and bubble. And what differentiates AI is the explosive growth. So the revenues are doubling, there's huge demand, and that demand has not necessarily been kind of met or deployed. So not that many companies have fully deployed AI in the way that they could. So that's this growth and this demand is kind of keeping it from being a bubble. The concern is that capital expenditure to revenue ratio of the companies who are raising this money is more stretched than before. So some things, this is more focused on the US market, something I read, but it's around 6 to 1 capex to revenue ratio. So there's two dynamics. There's strong growth potential in AI, which is only going up, but there's more concerning in terms of the investment ratio. How those play out is going to dictate whether it's going to be a bubble. I think, honestly, the fundamental strength of AI as a technology and what it can do across every sector from health to enterprise software is going to make it a fundamental part of every company. And so it's not really going to be about AI companies are doing this and these companies aren't. Now it's useful to talk in these ways for companies raising investment. It's a great media story. I think in the next few years, it's just going to become, well, in the mainstream as it already is, and every company will be involved. What's interesting is how the VC investment structure works. So there will be hardware companies who are making things and creating hardware. VCs don't tend to reward that kind of product because of the cycles and the 5-year cycles that they're looking to make returns on, and the vast majority of VC investment goes into software as opposed to hardware. So these are things to be looked at, and structural kind of changes needed in that sense. But in terms of where AI is going, yeah, it's going places.
Yeah, I mean, you've touched on a couple of interesting things there, which we'll just unpick for a second. So, again, referring back to Cambridge Tech Week, it was really interesting to hear from Jess Montgomery, who is the director of AI at CAM at the University of Cambridge. And, Jess was describing that companies are starting to see gains from using AI, which I think your data backs. But what we're lacking is when you survey the general public, they want to see AI making a positive impact in the things like the delivery of public services and the efficiency of kind of government services. And we just haven't seen that kind of evidence just yet. But data-led conversations are always more powerful than just opinion, right? So it's interesting that, as you say, companies are finding huge productivity gains already from AI, considering we're still fairly new into this. And maybe reassuringly, which goes against some of the negative kind of narrative you read in the media, is only 6% have said they've made redundancies due to AI. So it isn't kind of AI removing jobs. This is more about productivity gain and deploying high-skilled people into more productive tasks, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it's key to remember that our survey and our report focuses on tech companies in the tech sector. So the evidence is there for within the tech sector, but naturally these are going to be the most AI-ready, forward-looking companies. What we're seeing is that companies are not necessarily making huge redundancies, but they're being much more cautious in hiring and selective in hiring, and using the time to figure out how AI fits into what we're doing as a company, and where do the hires need to be made, or can AI do this themselves? It's an interesting dynamic, because companies now, what we're seeing more and more, are scaling with fewer and fewer people. So there's a lot of discussion. Are we going to get to a place where there's going to be the first one-man unicorn company or one-woman unicorn company? We're seeing these really small teams who are getting big revenue. I mean, Lovable is like Europe's fastest growing company. I think it's 45 employees are generating over 2 million per person in annual revenue. Like, they've seen massive growth. So, I mean, it's an interesting one. I think to your point around what the public wants to see, I think what's talked about a bit less, not necessarily the redundancies, but there's a bit of a mental toll in terms of how worried people might be about their jobs and that uncertainty going forward. So that's a big part of it. I think ultimately, yeah, we got to look at AI as a tool, as an opportunity to accelerate work, to accelerate productivity and improve things. How that's managed alongside the human side is, I mean, it's a super interesting space. There's lots of different opinions on it. My hope is that it is an opportunity to augment, to do more. And I think if you look at it from like the content creation aspect that I come from, like first you had a pen, then you had a laptop, then you had AI.
Yeah, exactly. I think you touched on this right at the beginning. You know, if we rewind the clock to pre-AWS days, you know, a startup would have had to spend a ton of capital hiring engineers and building its own infrastructure, right? And every startup had to do that. So huge amounts of duplication. And when cloud came in and AWS came in, then, you know, suddenly all of that is virtualized and it's a commodity overnight, right? And you remove so much cost and staffing needs just because that stuff no longer needs to be built in house. So this is kind of not too dissimilar from that, really, in terms of the productivity gains it provides.
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree with that. And it's actually crazy how an industry has all been built on AWS itself. So, good friend of mine has this company that's building on basically tools to support developers on AWS. So there you go, a new company just from that.
Exactly. I mean, I used to work at a startup called Twilio who IPO'd in 2016, and that was built on AWS, right? Billions of dollar company. Yeah, crazy. Okay, well, we started to, unpick a lot around the scaling challenge. You obviously surveyed startup leaders and tech leaders in the survey to identify some of those barriers to growth. I think you've covered most of these, but that kind of list was things like government intervention in funding markets, R&D tax credits, regulatory sandboxes for AI, and something close to your heart, I'm assuming, is the improved visa and immigration processes as well. Is there anything there you want to kind of deep dive on?
Yeah, I mean, so we surveyed over 1,000 UK tech startup leaders. The vast majority of those are founders. We're very founder focused in our community. And I mean, they identified their two biggest challenges to growth, obstacles to growth. And it's no real surprise, it's capital and talent. And as a solution to those, they kind of proposed some of those things you mentioned there. I think one of the points you mentioned on increasing capital, a big part of it is the enhanced incentives for the investors to invest in the ecosystem. So just improving the investment ecosystem. That comes down to how are we releasing the capital to fund the VCs who then invest in the startups. A big part of that is pension funds. Pension funds in Europe and the UK allocate such a small percentage of their assets under management to VCs, to the startup ecosystem. We need to see change there. There are initiatives in the UK. There's an initiative with a plan to allocate 5% of UK pension fund assets into startups by 2030. It's a positive development, but we need to do more. And on the talent side, so the founders we speak to, they need that technical talent, but they're also looking for that talent that's experienced that scaling journey before, that's gone through the scale, the unicorn, the exit. And there's been success in terms of apprenticeships. So we had a roundtable event a few months ago, and the founders are actually quite pleased with what the government's done in terms of apprenticeships. But founders need talent now, and they generally share preference for policies that reduce talent costs, so the tax credits you mentioned, or expand the talent pool through visas, remote work, in like short term versus the more long term talent development. I think it's a combination of the two, but yeah, founders are always looking for fixes now so everything's quick.
Yeah, for sure. So we are on Cambridge Tech Podcast, and it was interesting that you had some data for the East of England in the report. So I think the East came out as number 2 in the UK for funding at 269 million, and came in third for the number of AI startups, I guess, in total numbers of companies. So, what kind of strengths and weaknesses did the research uncover for the East of England?
Overall, it's the second biggest startup ecosystem after London, Greater London. Obviously, Cambridge is at the absolute centre. The whole East of England accounts for 90% of the UK tech's total value. It's one of the fastest growing, and we're seeing growing investment. Obvious strengths of Cambridge as a hub, as you all know, for deep tech, AI, life sciences, the innovation clusters that you have, the university successes that have, again, been through our programs that have exited. So Darktrace, Quantinuum. I think Raspberry Pi is from Cambridge. That's one of the only successful tech IPOs in recent years on London Stock Exchange. I mean, there's loads of positives about the ecosystem and the connections with London, and real opportunity to continue to build it out as this leading global AI hub. So super exciting place to be. And all the founders that come in through our visa program who are exploring the UK, 9 times out of 10, they're looking at, do I settle in Cambridge or London? Do I enjoy the slightly more countryside-y feel and relaxed life of Cambridge, or at least the access, or London? And yeah, it's obviously right up there as a global tech hub. Great place to be for scaling a company. We've seen so many examples.
Yeah, I mean, we are obviously focused on the Cambridge cluster, but we have spoken to an increasing number of people from around the UK, Manchester, Leeds, etc. So, and I guess a lot of the kind of commonality is a university at the heart of a cluster. So, Manchester springs to mind, Leeds, as I said, Bristol, Glasgow, Edinburgh. What are you seeing, in terms of highlights around the rest of the country?
It would be those you mentioned, West Midlands, Northwest. And I think it is important for different areas in the country to differentiate somewhat, and that kind of happens naturally with the strengths in research. I mean, Bristol's very big on deep tech as well. There's the whole Science Creates ecosystem out there, which is super cool. But having that more specialized focus, it's interesting with the new AI investment from the US that there's a focus on the Northeast. One of the smaller ecosystems, but we did a bit of a deep dive into the different tech ecosystems in the UK, and there's kind of potential in lots of places, but an interesting place for that to focus. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous, but a lot of it comes down to like getting the trains working, because if you can actually get people moving around the UK and get into connectivity, then it's going to improve ecosystem across the UK. And it's so often we speak to founders, how can we help improve tech ecosystems across the UK? And especially with our rising stars, we're traveling to Wales, to Scotland, to the Northeast, Northwest, and so often ridiculous for 21st century UK when we're talking about AI investment, but it costs kind of 200 quid to get on a train, and it's delayed 10 hours. So improving that is going to help. But I mean, there's a lot of growth across the UK, which is good to see. There's some ecosystems which need more support. What was interesting with some of the research we did was how much founders are giving away based on which region they're in at the earliest stages, so how much they're giving away of their company. And so you find that actually in places like the Northeast, of the founders that are there, they're giving away quite a lot of equity. That impacts their ability to scale and as well, because there's not that much attraction to future investors. So it's all about what we work to do is really support ecosystems across the UK. A lot of the international attention is on London, and it's super important to spread that out, to support founders all over.
Yeah, no, and to go back to your point about infrastructure, we spoke to Andy Williams, who's the chair of Oxford Cambridge Supercluster Board, back in May, and there's lots of talk about the Golden Triangle. The connectivity between Oxford and Cambridge has to improve. So, there's a lot riding on the proposed East-West Rail link. So, to your point, trains are super important. Okay, so we've covered the UK's kind of leadership in Europe. We've talked about some of the limiting factors in terms of scaling companies, certainly in the AI space in the UK. We've talked about some of the challenges that the founders have highlighted. And we've also touched on the east of England and, covered the UK a little bit more broadly. So we've covered a lot. But as we, move towards the end of the conversation, what does the UK need to be doing to maintain this kind of leadership in Europe and perhaps start to close the gap, if you like, on the US?
It's simple, and it's a little bit repeating what I've said, but it's keeping our best companies here and encouraging them to scale, creating the conditions to allow them to scale their startups and their teams in the UK and have their global HQs in the UK and expand. We need to stop the exodus of talent at growth stages going to the US, and we need to encourage more companies to scale and exit here who can then give back to our ecosystem. That's fundamental. And to do that, we have such a good environment, as I said, for starting companies. We have that incredible research. We are an attractive place for global talent. We don't pay as much as the US ecosystem, but I mean, personally, I would prefer to live in the UK at this moment in time. That's another conversation. It's keeping the best talent here and scaling in the UK, and that's going to give back, and that's going to provide the ecosystem. And we need to untap the investment for that to happen. In order to do that, I think it needs to come down to private markets. Government intervention in funding markets is great if it can be done in a way that unleashes capital from private markets, from pension funds, from institutional investors to create that ecosystem. A challenge that we do have with hardware companies, maybe some of them in Cambridge, is that reliance on government funding grants that then doesn't necessarily support their onward journey. So yeah, short answer, we need investment, and we need that to support the talent and the startups to start here. We're helping support startups to scale, and we need to create the conditions for them to stay to do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay. Yeah. So we've covered a lot of ground as we kind of close. You mentioned at the top in your introduction the number of different programs that TechNation offers, and clearly TechNation is a key organisation in making all of this happen. Where can people find out more about what's going on with TechNation?
Technation.io is our website. We support founders at every stage of the journey. We have the likes of Darktrace, Deliveroo, Monzo, Revolut have been for our programs. 30% of UK unicorns have been for a TechNation program. We've supported startups and their teams across the UK for many years now. If you're super early stage, let's say pre-seed, seed stage, then Rising Stars is a fantastic platform to get your startup noticed and to get involved with our community. And then otherwise, it depends on your focus or where you're at in your journey. Or for example, climate tech startups, we have a program called Upscale, which is just the new cohort's been announced today, actually, which is specifically for companies at that critical juncture of raising growth capital. So Series A companies raising Series B. So we're trying to tackle that problem head on. We have really cool companies in that cohort. Actually, one of them is called Generate. The founder's famous for being on Dragon's Den and getting 1 million views on YouTube. So check that out. But it's really get in touch with us, with the team. And it's not just our specific programs, but it's really the network that we offer, the research and insights, the talent solutions, and the ecosystem. We have this kind of whole ecosystem approach, and hopefully there's things we can do to support your scaling journey, certainly wherever you are in the UK and whatever your focus. So the message is really get in touch. Let's kind of work together. Let's support you. And what we do is scale companies from seed startup to success story, and that's what we like to continue doing.
Perfect. Well, thanks again, Marco, for your time. It's really appreciated.
Brilliant. Thanks so much.
Today's show was produced by Carl Homer of Cambridge TV and supported by our media partner, Business Weekly. The Cambridge Tech Podcast is available on all major podcast platforms and on cambridgetechpodcast.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please give it a 5-star review. It'll really help others discover the show.